Good evening, Chris, award-winning author. How are you this evening?
I'm very well, and thanks for having me.
So I have to give this caveat before I've spoken to a few folks like yourself over the last few months, and I have to give this slightly embarrassing, sheepish caveat before I start, which is that whilst I have been a reader of science fiction for most of my life, since I was probably about 10, it turns out, after focusing on this YouTube channel that I've got now, that my range was pretty narrow. And I have one of the joys of focusing a bit more on it over the last year or two for this channel has been that I have come across authors that I didn't know existed, and you're in very good. You're among those, I'm afraid, but you're in very good company. Robert Silverberg, for example, was somebody that I'd never heard of. And Adam Roberts. Somebody I spoke to earlier this year, I had to make some confession to, but you're in very, very good company. But what I have really enjoyed doing is catching up on some reading that I've somehow missed over the intervening years, and I've been tackling some, but not all yet, of your oeuvre over the last few months, just this year actually. So I think, if my brief research on the interweb is correct, that you have been writing in short story form at least for a long time, since like the 90s, if not even longer than that. And scandalously, as I said, I'm yet to read any of those short stories. So I'm curious to know where I should start. Is there a particular collection that you're particularly pleased with, that I should start with?
Well, my first collection, the Turing Test, includes most of the stories I've published back in the 90s and onwards. I think my very first story I ever had published, I didn't think it was quite good enough to include in the collection, to be honest. That didn't make the cut, but most of the other ones that came out during that period are in the Turing Test, which was my first collection, and that was a big success for me, that book as well.
So I gather, yes.
Yeah. It's unusual for a short story collection to make a splash, but that one did.
Yeah, and from a small too.
Even though it came from a very small press. Yeah, that's right as well. Yeah,
one of the many tangents that we'll probably go off on, I'm curious to know, is that if I understand right, the Elastic Press, which I think was just a one-man band, stopped, closed down business not long after they published this. And yet
that's true.
The edition that I've got, and I can tell that because the price is significantly greater than it was when it first came out. I think it was published at $5.99. This was $9.99. And yet this edition is signed. So you must have done a recent batch of signing, at least. Yeah. So
a long time after. Long time after Elastic Press closed down, with Andrew Hook's help, and Andrew Hook basically is Elastic Press. We kept that book in print. It was
nice.
We continued to order batches and
I see.
Keep it out
because it still says Elastic Press on it.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, we didn't bother to change all that, but it was essentially, in a way, it was for Elastic Press because Andrew was helping me get it out there, but the Elastic Press itself was no longer in business.
No.
So that was how that happened. Yeah.
And I'm right in thinking, I just lose track of which short story collection it is, but it's the Turing Test, isn't it, that you won an award for, which is a short story collection award, not a science fiction specific award. Is that right?
That's not. It was. Andrew Hook, I was very grateful for, because I never even thought of entering it, to be honest. But he put it in, and blow me, when I'd forgotten that he even put it in, he contacted me and said, "You've made the shortlist," and. Nice. That was pretty amazing. Yeah, because I was, I wasn't a well-known writer. Well, I'm not a very well-known writer now, but I was even less well-known then. And it was a good shortlist. I mean, Anne Enright was on it. She was a Booker Prize winner. There were lots of really quite big shot writers on it. And I won. It was fantastic. I could hardly believe it. But it was sort of got my career going, really, because the fact of that. Publishers were interested in publishing my novels. A couple of my novels have been published by small presses, but not only like very tiny print runs, but then I managed to get the actual commercial book deals. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
And staying on the subject of short stories, then am I right in thinking that your short story kind of back catalogue has served as something of a nursery for your longer work? There are some of your longer work that is either a continuation of or based upon some of the one or more short stories in your past.
Yeah. I think my first 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 novels are all based on short stories, actually. Yeah, or rather, they started life as short stories. A couple of those short stories never got published because I just realised they weren't really short stories. They were embryo novels and novels. They all started. My first 6 novels all started as That's
I probably describe myself as a lapsed short story reader. I cut my science fiction teeth on Isaac Asimov when I was 10 or 11 maybe, and I still have them on my shelf somewhere. A load of his kind of early science fiction collections from when he was first writing for Campbell in Astounding and so on, and I devoured those and read them over and over again to the point that the books fell apart. But I haven't read a great deal since then, I don't think, that I can recall. So I'm definitely looking forward to get stuck into yours, because I am.
Well, I'm proud of them. But I think science fiction is quite well suited to the short story form. Because because science fiction isn't primarily about character development and all that kind of thing. I mean, you can do all that, but it's not primarily about that. It is about ideas, and short stories are quite you can jump straight into the middle of things with a science fiction story. Wham bam, there's idea. I think it works quite well with short stories, and I enjoyed those Asimov stories when I was a kid as well.
Yeah.
And, lots of other science fiction stories, some of which I have no idea what they were anymore. Just stories I read in collections. Which had made a lasting impression on me. Van Vogt stories, I think, are some of them. His stories I liked as a kid.
There's another author that I hadn't heard of until quite recently. Outrageous.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's not like I didn't read anything. I did, but like I say, quite a narrow range, it turns out.
Well, I think we all do. We all do. There's so much stuff you can't read everything. But,
yeah.
My early science fiction reading was almost entirely dictated by the fact that my dad was a bit of a science fiction reader on the side, and he had a whole shelf of science fiction books. I mean, he was a prolific reader, and he read whodunits, and he read I can't remember what you call them, sort of Georgian romances, all sorts of things. But I didn't. The Georgian romances and the whodunits did nothing for me. But I just devoured his science fiction collection, and that happened to include Van Vogt, Brian Aldiss. I still like very much. Asimov, I think. Heinlein as well. Yeah. So so that was my beginning in science fiction, and that still is my period, really. I mean, even the writers I've discovered since, and I'm fond of, like Philip Dick, really are from that period. Although Philip Dick wouldn't have been my dad's thing,
No.
Too sort of zany and druggy for my dad, but it still comes from that era. I think it's a bit like pop music. It's like you listen to it for a while. Formative years, and then you kind of stop listening to it so much. Occasionally you'll hear a song, a recent song, you like it, but it's really your stuff is still the stuff you listen to when you're a teenager, and I feel the same about science fiction.
Yes, indeed. I read quite a bit of Arthur C. Clarke when I was a kid, and I have discovered recently that on rereading him, I find him terribly dry and not actually that interesting a storyteller. No. There are a couple of exceptions, but there are books that I loved when I was a teenager that I'm now wary about rereading in case they're crushing disappointment.
Well, I agree with you. It's funny. I mean, I find Arthur Clarke very dry. I read Childhood's End a few years ago, and I thought there are literally no characters in that book. Really,
I hated it. Yeah,
a series of ciphers that they're completely disposable, and in the end, he destroys the whole human race. Just disposes of the whole human race.
And there was an entire episode with a guy going off to their home planet and back again, and that was like a child. What was that about? The same was true for City in the Stars. I didn't like that either.
No, it's true. But then other stories that I read, then I still like. Like another guy that my dad had several books of was Ballard, and I still like Ballard. But you know,
me and JG had an unfortunate start to our relationship.
oh, really?
The first of his books that I read was Crash, and so far the only of his books that I read, and I didn't. I thought it was kind of put me off, yeah. And lots of people have told me, no, you really must read more and start with this short story. So I need to. I sent him to Library Coventry for a while, so I need to.
Right.
To learn again.
Well, I think Crash is a bad one to start with, but
yeah,
I've got to say I actually quite enjoyed Crash. I mean, I don't know what it says about me, but I actually quite enjoyed it. But it's not his best. No. I think he's actually particularly good as a short story writer, actually. But
so I gather, and then some of his really early sort of disastery books, The Drought and Crystal World.
Oh, Drowned World is brilliant, yeah, and
Drowned World, yeah,
Crystal World, isn't it? They're brilliant, but they're almost like he doesn't do much in terms of character development or plot. It's all about amazing imagery and ideas, you know, and that keeps it going.
Yeah, so I'm open-minded enough to give him another go. I feel like I owe him that at least.
Yeah, pick up a short story collection.
Yeah. No, I have several. I've got a collection of his books actually, so I've got no shortage of things to pick from. I just need to just actually do it at some point. At the risk of asking you to choose your favorite literary child, which of your novels do you? Well, there's two questions, I suppose. Which of them are you most happy with? Which of them floats your boat the most? And which of them do you most often recommend to other people? If someone didn't know your work, which one would you suggest that they started reading?
I'm proud of all my novels. To be fair, I'm not. You know, I don't. That doesn't sound big-headed. There's none of them I really don't like. They all have flaws, of course. As time goes on, you can see the flaws. I suppose Dark Eden is by quite a wide margin my most successful novel in terms of sales and winning a prize and the rest of it. So there is that, and it's probably also in some ways, well, with the other Eden books, my most complex novel in terms of numbers of characters and stuff going on.
So Dark Eden, funny enough, was the first one of yours that I read. I read it earlier this year, and really, really loved it. And the same for the other two. Although I think probably Dark Eden's if you forced me to choose a favorite, it'd probably be Dark Eden. But the other, I did enjoy the evolution of the world building through the other two was really good as well. In fact, I've got some questions about Dark Eden. So
in some ways, of the three, my personal favorite is Daughter of Eden, the third one. But that's not. I don't exactly think it's better than the others. I just have a soft spot for it because I like the narrator and I like the way it kind of wrapped things up, and so that is in some ways my favourite.
Am I right? Do I remember rightly that in the first two you had a sort of rotating narrator?
That's right, and I was going to do the same thing in the third one, but then suddenly it didn't seem to work. And I suddenly thought, I'm just going to tell the whole thing from the point of view of Angie Redlanton. She's a fairly humble character. She's got a terrible facial deformity and everything.
Yes.
She's used to people being nasty to her, and yet she ends up, making something of her life, and I just like her sort of story arc, and I like all the things going on around her, which is quite a lot,
Yes,
and which, without giving anything away, quite a lot. Probably more happens in that book than any of the others, I'm particularly proud of that one because I'm particularly fond of that one. I'd say actually, not necessarily prouder of it than the others.
Yeah,
to be fair.
I did enjoy it. And I thought that the whole series does a great job of, well, if I can call it a series, the trilogy, the Eden books, does a great job showing how myths and even religions get started and why certain hierarchies stick around even when we try to change them. Did you always have a plan for those stories to highlight I don't know if tension is the right word, but the tension or the differences between male-centric society and a female-centric society, kind of patriarchal versus matriarchal? Was that your intent when you started out, or did it just happen that way?
Well, I formed a kind of theory. Some people didn't like this. When it started out, the society in Eden was not strictly matriarchal, but it was most of the leading figures were women in the society when it started out. And by the end of Dark Eden, the society had split in two, and both the two sides were headed by men. And my theory was not that men are better at running societies or anything, men rise to the top in times of conflict. That was my idea, it was originally run by women because it was a single unit, and it actually thought of itself as a family. It just called itself the family,
Yes.
And women just naturally ran it, the same as my experience. Women usually do run families, but as the men fighting and conflict and killing came into the picture, then men actually started to rise. I wasn't trying to say that was a good thing.
No, definitely.
I was saying that's how I felt it would perhaps work. Sometimes people said that didn't like me doing that. I'm afraid I felt that was in my gut. I felt that's how it would work.
It's funny how all of that was triggered by John just having ideas above his station and kind of, well, hang on a minute, can't you all see we're going to starve if we don't do something? Triggering a sequence of events. Yeah, I liked it. So you had enough of a job to do with world building on an entirely different planet. Well, then you made it even harder for yourself, or perhaps easier, I don't know, by making it a sort of wandering planet with no star. And having to contrive ways to keep a human population alive on something which ought to be sort of barely above, absolute zero and pitch black. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think I've spoken to. I spoke to an astronomer about this once, and he said it couldn't actually work. But my idea was that there's no reason why the core of a planet, it's a rogue planet, it's a planet with no sun. They exist. They really exist. I didn't know that. I didn't know that when I wrote the book, by the way. I just thought they probably would exist, and I was rather chuffed when I found out they really did exist.
Yeah.
But I thought to myself, and this is also, I believe, the science does back this up, that there's no reason why I shouldn't have a hot core. And then I developed the idea of life forms that evolved under the ground when it's warm, and then gradually made their way to the surface. And in the process of coming to the surface, they released, they themselves generated heat, which warmed created a warm or livable atmosphere. I'm told that wouldn't work because it's too much. They would just dissipate into space too quickly. But it felt plausible to me, and that's all I want really. Something that feels plausible. But I didn't. Also, of course, the people in the Dark Eden don't know that. So they don't know how it works themselves because they're not very scientific or anything. So
no,
I had to hint at it some, but I didn't have to describe the science in detail, which is probably as well. But that was my. But I did give it all quite a lot of thought. And in my own mind, I had a sort of whole system where things evolved underground, and we had these sort of trees that emerged. They call them trees. In Eden, they look like trees, but they don't have leaves.
Yeah, sort of tree analogues. Yeah,
tree analogues. They're geothermal trees that have very deep roots that basically pump the sap down underground, so it gets hot, and then pump it back to the surface again. And they also act like radiators for their surroundings.
Yeah.
And they also have luminous flowers, so they give out light. It's a kind of eerie environment for the action to take place. A luminous forest. It's always dark, but there is always the light coming from the trees.
I thought the world building, to use that phrase, was very evocative. It was very easy to, I felt anyway, to visualize what that might look like. In as far as you can with just a written word. But, that's one of the joys for me actually of science fiction in general is the sort of internal picture that you build as you're reading.
Exactly. That is the pleasure, and it's fun to go to places that don't really exist and just live in them for a bit. But I say it kind of evolved for me because it kind of worked thematically as well. Because one of the things about their society is they really had a sense they came from somewhere where life was easier than there, i.e. the Earth, and I felt that if it was a dark planet with no sun, that would express that. They yearned for a world that they remembered. They didn't personally remember. They had a folk memory of a world full of light, and they lived, and they were aware that they lived in a world that was dark, and that kind of worked thematically as well. So it kind of all came together for me. I think maybe more than my any other books, they had all this. So many different things all coming together, which I was lucky I hit upon it. And weirdly enough, the inspiration for it all. I remember back in the early 90s and the mid 90s, I wrote a short story that's called The Circle of Stones, which was
Yes.
very rough prototype of Dark Eden. And I wrote it on in those days, I had one of those old Amstrad computers. You know, those ones with a black screen.
I do. My dad had one, yeah.
And the green letters on the screen, you know. And I think it was looking at that screen, which was like the inversion of a normal page, because it was shining letters and black background. And suddenly I hit upon the idea of a world that was like that. You know? That's how I first got the idea of all things. Yeah.
Well, not to blow smoke up your proverbial, but I happened to read Hot House by Brian Aldiss, not that long ago, and a completely different scenario, of course. But the world building in the two things, I think, is similarly evocative. Let's just leave it there.
I agree with you. Hot House. Well, I don't agree that they're similar, but I love Hot House. I think it's great.
I did enjoy it, or at least I enjoyed most of it. There were one or two of the stories, because I think it was a fix-up. Certainly read like one. And one or two of the components, I didn't think were as strong as the others, but generally speaking, it was really good, and certainly and two or three bits of it were, I thought, just really excellent.
I wasn't quite sure. Wasn't the world drawn to the moon by a giant cobweb or something? Wasn't that right? Was that?
Yes. The bit on the moon sort of didn't seem to fit to me. That was a bit strange.
No. It was a bit. Yeah, it was a bit sort of. He hadn't sort of. It wasn't quite the same kind of book as the Eden book, because he wasn't really worried about trying to make everything work completely. That kind of book can be fine as well. You know, I don't think. I quite liked it.
I'm agnostic. I have a science background. That's rather grand term for it. I did a science degree a long time ago, so I suppose my head is wired that way. But I'm quite happy to suspend disbelief when I'm reading or anything really, but particularly science fiction. Yeah. The other book, I don't know. Did you ever read Heliconia by?
Oh, I'd say Heliconia was actually definitely consciously an influence on Dark Eden.
Oh, really?
The world building in the Heliconia books is wonderful. And
Brian Aldiss is one of that small group of authors that I had heard of, and I read that. I've got the Grafton paperback somewhere from the 80s up on my shelf there, but I recently acquired the hardcovers, which are rather lovely. But that's a book that books that I really loved. I've read them a few times now, but not for a long time. Actually, I should probably give them another.
Yeah, they merit some read, because that is a very immersive world, isn't it? And that is pretty well thought out. I think a lot of it. I mean, I love the two sons, and there's the short year and the long year as they go around.
Yeah, the long year. Yeah. Game of Thrones has got nothing on that. It's the winter's not a few years; it's hundreds and hundreds of years. Yeah.
The hundreds. Yeah, and the way that the two dominant life forms, alternate.
Oscillate. Yes, that's right.
Humans are more powerful in the summer, and in the winter, the Fagors are.
That's right. Yes, with the big horny head things.
Descended from goats, a sort of dominant creature. I thought that was beautifully done, and it was just you just totally immersive. You just totally brought into it. And it was just lovely to.
You're piquing my re-interest now. I really must read that again too.
Yeah, no, I'm piquing my own. I should go check it out again sometime.
Sorry.
So the world building of that was definitely an influence, and also some of the things he did with language in that book was an influence as well, because he didn't massively do a lot with language, but he just coined new words for things, in a way that I liked, and I did pick up on that.
Yeah, I thought the way that the 250, I can't remember, is it 150 years after the original landing is when we pick up events in Dark Eden. So the been insular as a small group has grown. There's I can't remember having not that many people, a few hundred maybe, and the language that's presented there is simplified or streamlined. The vocabulary is smaller, and I thought then that the way that then subsequently developed from that baseline over the course of the next two books was really clever as well. It was noticeable.
Well, yeah, they had to develop new words for things, even when they first encountered a sea. Yeah, they lost the word the sea, so they had to find a new word for it. They call it world.
I suppose my my comfort zone, if you like, my science fiction sweet spot is probably space opera and spaceships and stuff. Of the books of yours that I've read so far, and we'll come to what the others are in a minute. Your Eden is the more, from my perspective anyway, the more overtly science fiction-y of the books, in that it has spaceships, or at least they're referred to. It's on another planet. It kind of ticks some genre boxes from that perspective. But your more recent books are set on Earth or something very like it anyway. And I was curious to know, which do you prefer to write? Does one give you more narrative freedom than the other if you have a more fantastical setting?
Actually, dark. I think the Eden books are the only novel I've set on a completely different planet. And one of my more recent books was set in a very weird place that might as well be a different planet. I enjoy doing the more weird ones and the more. But sometimes that comes and sometimes it doesn't. I do quite enjoy doing novels in a world that's more like this one too. I mean, I can't really say which I prefer. I mean, the weirder ones, they give you a bit more scope for your subconscious to just let rip. There is that. I think my more recent one, Beneath the World of Sea, which is I don't know if you read that one, but that is.
The two that I've read recently on top of the Eden books are Beneath the World of Sea and. Yeah. The other week, in fact, recently, the last week or two, tomorrow.
Okay, yeah. So
quite different in setting than Dark Eden, but
they are. But Beneath the World of Sea, nevertheless, is set in an area called the Zona, which when you're inside, you might as well be in another planet, because what's there is a complete biology that's completely different from biology anywhere else on Earth. It's not even related to the life on it. I mean, it's a funny thing when you think about it, that every single living thing on Earth is related to every other living thing on Earth. Kind of genetic code and everything. And it seems like, in a way, that is odd, because it means that life only evolved once on Earth, or at least if it evolved more than once, only one strain survived. So I thought, why couldn't there? Well, suppose there was a place where another completely different kind of life existed, either because it evolved separately or because it came from another planet, or what nobody in the book knows. That's what
I was reading something recently. In fact, I think I mentioned it to you on our email exchange, where that sort of is considered in a slightly different fashion. It was Martin McInnes in Ascension. In that's very focused on life in general and the precariousness of it and the interconnectedness of it.
Yeah, particularly the unlikelihood of what they call eukaryote life evolving. It's one of the things he focused on, isn't it? That that one could just about imagine very primitive algae evolving in other worlds, but the kind of multi-complicated cells that make up humans. And that's almost incredible that they exist at all. And they can make something out of that, isn't it? I thought, I don't read a lot of recent science fiction, but I read that and I thought he's very good on that. I read one of his other books actually a while ago. Oh damn, what's it called? What's it about?
It'll either be Gathering Evidence or Infinite Ground.
Gathering Evidence. That monkey. No, chimpanzees, wasn't it? Yeah. Gathering Evidence. Yeah,
yes, that's right. That's the one I've been recommended to read next.
Martin McGinnis creates quite a distinctive, very somber and rather dark mood, doesn't it? It's quite very distinctive. So I started reading. I'd forgotten about that other one. I'd certainly forgotten the name of the author. And I was only a few pages into a sensational, maybe 10 or 20 pages in. I thought I'd read something by this guy before, and I checked, and sure enough, it was that book. It was the same vibe as. It's very uncanny feeling, and it's a bit sort of. It's not very cheery.
No, it's not. And I actually listened to it an audio book rather than. I do have the book, but I it was convenient for me to listen to it at the time, and whilst I was out running or something, and it had actually in this respect there are parallels to one of your books. We'll come back to in a minute. It had almost like a dreamlike quality to it was almost just a little bit out of focus is how I felt when I was listening to it, and that might have been to do with the narrator. She was very good actually, and it worked very well to have a female narrator.
Yes,
for that book, I thought. So Beneath the World of Sea, which, as you say, is set in the submundo, literally the underworld, and I've just done a little thing for my channel about zones in science fiction, and you sort of double down in them on the zone context, on the zone concept in Beneath the World of Sea, because you've got the submarine, the delta itself, and then it's surrounded by, which is weird enough, as you say, different biology, funky creatures, and the sort of effect it seems to exert on the human residents, and then surrounding that zone is the zone of oblivion or forgetting. I forget what it's called now.
If you don't remember any. If you go in that zone and come out of it, you don't remember anything that happened.
No, and I thought I really enjoyed the copper. Is it Ben? And his kind of like sense of anxiety of like, shit, what did I do while I was there? Did I do something I shouldn't have done? And then he didn't want to read it. Had his journals, but didn't want to read them in case there was something.
It's quite a creepy book, but Ben is a very, very repressed character. He outwardly is a very conscientious copper, but he doesn't really know his own self at all. You know, he's so repressed, he doesn't really know.
He's almost playing a part. Yeah,
he's just like a shell, really. He doesn't know what's inside him. So he knows just enough about himself to know it's the case that he is like an unexploded bomb, and he's terrified that he's done some awful thing with his own. Whether it's a murder or a rape or something like that. He just doesn't know, and he's terrified of going back through it. But
I had inevitably, with my sort of sciencey kind of bent, I was like, where is this place exactly, and how has it come to have completely separate biology? Is it extraterrestrial? Is it just a separate evolutionary path that only that bit of the world happened? And how does the zone work? I didn't know. So I had lots of those questions going on in my head whilst I was reading the book, which I did enjoy. So the comparison I was going to make to In Ascension is that I felt like that had I imagine it was intentional on your part, but it had a dreamlike quality to the writing or the reading experience. It was almost surreal in places in terms of the kind of background, what was going on in the delta, and the environment and the trees, and the fact that it wasn't really any solid ground at all apart from the bit where the town was. I enjoyed that kind of sense of feeling slightly sort of drugged as I was reading it, in a good way.
It was a bit like a drug experience, I think. And my idea, the trees are. They got, the leaves are all kind of sparrows and magenta coloured.
Yes,
like you say, apart from one sort of island in the middle of it, it's basically it's essentially a large sea.
And the artwork does a good job of evoking that as well. I think
it's a lovely job. It's really nice. And the idea was that when you're in there, it has a psychic effect on you. And particularly if you're near the creatures called duendes, but just generally it has a psychic effect on you. And so that's the dreamlike thing. Your unconscious is constantly spilling up to the surface all the time.
Indeed, yeah. So back to the zones again. Like, is that something that you've been a fan of in the past when you've had the time to read a bit more science fiction? Are you drawn to those? Like Roadside Picnic would be an obvious reference point.
Yeah, Roadside Picnic. To be fair, Roadside Picnic was where I got the word zone from. And also the film Stalker, which is based on Roadside, which I've watched I think 3 times. I really like it. Because
I've never seen it. I have read the book, but I haven't seen it.
It's a weird film because it's just waste. When you go in, if you look at it objectively, it's just filmed in wasteland. There's nothing particularly weird about it. But because you've been told it's the zona, they just call it the zone. The zona is translated into Portuguese, but it feels uncanny, and there's not any aliens or anything like that. It's uncanny. At one point, the 3 characters just go off into a dream. They're just lying down next to a little stream. They're just lying there in a dream, and it's a extraordinary film actually, because almost nothing happens in it, but it's kind of very, very atmospheric.
Is the movie a sort of Western-made movie, Stalker, or is it a Russian-made movie?
It's a Russian movie made by.
It is a Russian movie, yeah. Okay.
By Tarkovsky, the same guy that made Solaris.
Of course, yeah. Yes.
Which, of course, is another very slow and rather mysterious film.
Well, funny enough, actually, it's a good Radio 2 link there, because my very next book, I've just finished...
is Solaris.
Yeah, I've just finished War of the Maps by Paul McCauley, which I very much enjoyed, and then my next book is in fact Solaris, so which I haven't read.
which is by Lem, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, so it's all Lem. Yeah,
yeah. Which I like. I like the novel very much as well, but the film is quite difficult to understand what's going on, but it's certainly very atmospheric. And
yeah.
it was billed when it came out, I remember, as The Russian 2001.
Really? Okay.
And yeah, I can see that. It has, you know, it has the same kind of. It is a very different kind of film, but it has the same kind of weirdness. Yeah, and I love Stellaris and Stalker very much. Whereas both those films were an influence on Beneath the World of Sea, I think, and I actually I amuse myself by referencing all these things that were influences in the book. So there's a boat captain in Beneath the World of Sea who's called Strugatsky, which is the author.
Okay, I didn't spot that.
And there's a submarine called Stellaris. I mean, that was just me amusing myself, really, but it is all in there.
Well, if you can't have fun, what can you do?
Yeah.
As I say, the two books other than the Eden 3 that I read are Beneath the World of Sea and Tomorrow, and in both those books, I felt unsettled, a little bit off kilter, or again in a good way. You know, you've got the Delta, which seems like it might be near, but not in Brazil, maybe. And there are a bunch of drifting and strange collection of expats. Plus, there's the Duende and the weird, maybe alien biology. And in Tomorrow, there's some ambiguity about, in my mind anyway, whether we're even on Earth, just because the geography is completely different, and there are you know, pterosaurs and naiads swimming in the river. Do you have that objective in mind to sort of unsettle, or you know, your reader as they're reading it? Is that an objective, or is that just a handy byproduct?
No, I think both those books I was trying to achieve. I like a book that creates a mood, you know, it creates its own distinct mood, and it isn't just a story. It's not just a sort of factual story, or it's not just like everyday life. You know, I mean, we like science fiction, don't we? Because it's not just like everyday life. It takes us to a place that's different. Now, I like it even better if it takes us to a sort of psychologically to a place that feels different as well. You know, not just you know, because some science fiction, although it's set in a very bizarre setting, the characters are still very sensible and rational.
Yeah.
Whereas I would like to have them a little bit deranged, or a bit sort of
most Ballardian of you. Yeah.
Those last two books are definitely influenced by Ballard, and
maybe a little bit Priestian, even, if that's a thing.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Yeah.
I haven't read the.
I think he does try and do something quite similar, and I've enjoyed a couple of his books. Though I always feel I never quite got the point of his books, but I certainly pick up a mood from them, which is good, which I like.
Well, the Dream Archipelago ones are the ones that sound to me like they might have a similar vibe, although I haven't read them, so it's not very helpful. But not yet, anyway.
No, I was just thinking, isn't the Dream Archipelago? That's the actual name of the novel, isn't it?
There's a short story collection called that, but then there are, which is I happen to have here because I'm meant to be reading a short story from it at the moment. But but I believe there are a number of his other novels which are.
I read a novel that was set. Yeah, I did. I can't remember the name of it now. Yeah. I thought it was called that, but it's Tommy Durst, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. That's a short story collection. Anyway, yeah, I like that. I liked it. That was I like the idea of what I would ideally like to write is an imaginary place that is sufficient, but nevertheless is described in such reality that you kind of half think, is that real? Is that actually a place that I just
where is that? Yeah.
I like that.
Well, I did have that exact feeling actually in both books. The sort of, frankly, I would have liked a map. That would have been ideal. I like a map, and then my ordered part of my mind is, well, I want to know, well, where is this place? And but then in Tomorrow, you kind of double down. Look, in Beyond the World, Beneath the World of Sea, rather, that seems like it's on the basis that people are speaking Portuguese and there's some reference to Brazil. It must be somewhere in that sort of region of South America. But in Tomorrow, it's like, I've no idea where we are. The geography doesn't make sense. It sounds like we're in some kind of South American jungle, but all the people have Anglo-Saxon names, and then they're referring to people in the north or the south, and all of the domestic staff are kind of white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, and it's that doesn't seem like is right. And then you've got the weird, wonderful creatures.
Actually, not all the names are Anglo-Saxon.
No.
Quite a lot of the names are Carthaginian, actually.
Oh, really? Okay, well, shows what I know. Just throw that in, yeah. Okay. So, look, on the subject of Tomorrow, So that is I'm using myself by, I mean, I'm sure this was deliberate, but it's a book written by an author, that's you, about an author failing to write a book. So I was curious to know to what extent is that autobiographical? Are you a procrastinator when it comes to your own writing?
And I tell you, that book is written in a way that no other book of mine has been written before or since. I wish I could always write them like this. I said to my wife one evening, I said, I'm fed up with prevaricate, because I get blocked quite regularly. I just can't think of what to write. I struggle with it. And I said to my wife one evening, Maggie, tomorrow I'm going to start writing my novel. I just said that to her. And she said, well, actually, that'd be quite a good line, first line. I thought, you know what, it would. And I sat down the next day and I really had no plan for the novel. I kid you not, no plan for the novel whatsoever. I just started with those words. And I had a whole first draft written in about 6 weeks, which is incredibly fast for me. It just poured out of me, and just from that first line, only it was that simple every time.
Yeah.
Well,
that's interesting. It's interesting that you say that. So I wonder then what your writing process for that book. So those of that are watching this that haven't read it, it's I don't know how best to describe it. It's certainly non-linear, almost kaleidoscopic structure to the book, in that it's from one paragraph or half a page or a page to the next. It could be the protagonist's youth, or the next bit he could be imprisoned in a shed in a cave in the jungle, and the next he might be an old man, and then back again, and then points in between, and it jumps around all over the place. It's very non-linear. So did you write it in linear fashion first and then break it up for the purpose of publishing it, or did you write it piecemeal like that?
No, I wrote it exactly like that. I mean, what you see is pretty much, with a few exceptions, the structure that I just came up with. So I'd feel it quite, I think, did I really do that? Because it feels like quite a difficult thing to do, to hold all the bits.
I was sure you wrote
bearing in mind that I was making them all up as I went along. None of them, I didn't have an overall plan. I just jumped to and fro, and somehow it wove together into a story of somebody's life. But I don't think I'm ever going to. It's just one of those freakish things. It's like one of those things where I can't think how I did it. Yeah.
I did enjoy that. I was a bit discombobulated at first, because I couldn't initially work out whether there was a kind of external narrator describing the protagonist and his inability to write this book, and then we were seeing scenes from the book that the protagonist was then writing, and I wasn't sure, because they were a bit out of sequence and it didn't seem to flow directly in the way that I imagined it would at first. I got my eye in quite quickly after that, but that was my first stumble, was like, well, what am I reading here? But I did enjoy it. I listened to that on audiobook, actually. My cheat code for listening to audiobooks is to have it on slightly faster than the I have it on like a 1.6 normally, because quite often the narrators are quite ponderous in their narrating, and I get impatient with it. But what I found I was lacking is, if I was reading the physical book, I presume anyway, I would have had a visual clue via the section breaks, or something. Yeah, I didn't have that at all on the audiobook, and because I had it a bit quicker than I did, there wasn't even a pause, or not a noticeable one, so it would almost one section would run into the next, and I would go, hang on a minute, what's going on here? I had to rewind it a few times to rewind it, showing my age. I had to go back 30 seconds to reorient myself. But I did enjoy it. It's not in my like I said, I was about to say I prefer, but it's not really true. It's more that most of the books that I've read have got the trappings of more overt science fiction. They're set in space on a planet. It's a galactic empire. There's spaceships and bangy, crashy things happening, and that's very much not the case with Tomorrow. It's
certainly not the case with Tomorrow, which is like, it's difficult to say what genre Tomorrow is really, because it's not really science fiction, really, but it has some of the it has some of the science fictional feel, because it's an imaginary world, and
yes.
It feels science fictional without actually being science fictional, I think, is my idea for Tomorrow. And again, it's a little bit like some Ballard novels, I think. I think that was probably one of the things that inspired me. And another novel that I admire, which is also not quite science fiction with that feel, is China Miéville's The City in the City. Which,
I love that. It's really good.
Right? That's another example.
That's another zone. Actually, I think I think of it as a zone, even though there's not a zone of physical effects.
Let's invent a new genre called the zone genre, where you just have a kind of place that isn't a real place, but
isn't quite right. Yeah. and that one's a culturally imposed zone, because the cities aren't like parallel worlds. They are physically intertwined, but you have to learn from a young age to kind of turn off those bits of your visual input. You can't see that bit because it's in the other city and you're not allowed to see it, and never the twain shall meet. I think it's great. Exactly, actually, it's another book that I really need to reread. Actually, I thought it was a fantastic book.
I was the only one. I've read several of his books. It's the only one I did enjoy very much, but I thought it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, and they made quite a good TV version of it, which I thought was quite a pivotal.
I've heard that. I haven't seen it. Yeah, I'm going to look it up. The other one of his that I hear really, really good things about that I haven't read yet is Embassy Town.
Well, I thought it was a very good idea, Embassy Town. Very good idea. It didn't quite come off for me.
Didn't quite work for you.
But the idea of these aliens that literally couldn't lie, and they couldn't even speak figuratively, because that's a lie. That's not speaking a literal truth. It's a lie, and they had to employ humans to help them to say things that weren't true, or say things that were made up. And that was very clever. But it didn't quite come alive for me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I haven't read it yet, so I do have it. So
there's one scene in the book which made me laugh, when they have a whole bunch of human beings all employed by these aliens. It was a meeting of figures of speech. They were all different figures of speech, all meeting together in a cafe for a chat. One of them was a metaphor. I can't remember what it was.
Okay, I'll look out for it. So back to your work again. So your work, I've seen described as literary science fiction. Were you always going to be a science fiction writer? Did you start out with that intention? Did it just work out that way? And why, if so, why genre fiction?
I do. When I was a kid, I loved science fiction, so there was that. And even when I was a littler kid, I loved children's fantasy. So throughout my childhood, I preferred books that were set in imaginary places, not real places. As the way I put it is, I prefer a book set in Narnia than one of those books where it's about some kids on a holiday and they lose their dog, and one of them, and they have to, they have to rescue their dog from a group of robbers or something. I wasn't anything like as interested in those as I was ones where there was something magic or another planet or something like that. So I've always had that predisposition, but I didn't particularly when I always knew I wanted to be a writer. Well, I would say always, but from my teens anyway. But I don't think I always thought I was going to be a science fiction writer. But even then, I was writing science fiction stories, and I just sort of stumbled into it. And I think to some extent, you're kind of shaped by what happens. Like I tried writing science fiction stories, and I sold some stories to Interzone. And then, of course, I'd got a place where I could go with my stories, so it made sense to carry on writing that kind of story. And I dare say if I'd sold a realist fiction story to someone, it might have
literary fiction.
But I think I would have always veered towards the weirdness.
I guess I don't know. Maybe you do, but my sense is there are, even now, in much reduced circumstances, there are still places where you can get short fiction published as a science fiction writer. I don't know of any where you can get short normal fiction published.
No, I don't think I'm much less likely to, because I think you're right. I think when I started out, I think perhaps even more. I don't know, but there was certainly a number of places where an amateur writer could get their stories published and get them seen. So, and then Interzone was one, God bless it, because that was what made made it really. And then latterly, I sold a lot of stories to Asimov as well, and there was also FNSF in America, wasn't there? And what's the more hard science fiction? Well, anyway, there's several in America, aren't there? And they come and go, but there's also a number of smaller science fiction magazines that came and went in Britain where you could sell stories as well. So it's brilliant. There's a place. There was a scene for which you could build on. I think.
Well, in your experience, I'm sure it's true for lots of other authors as well, is that those then become the kernels of ideas for future novels as well.
They do become that. That's true, but also they allow you to build a little bit of a reputation. Let
me just flick back to. I have a kind of nerdy question about Marcher. So I have the new Compress edition. Very nice it is too. Signed limited edition, by the way. I have number 76 of just 100. But this is a revised edition. I believe that there's an earlier edition as well that came out a number of years before. And so I'm curious to know what prompted the revision and how extensive is that revision? Like, do I need to get the earlier version as well because it's substantially different and it would read differently, or is it a different ending, or how does it work?
The earlier edition was published by another small press in America called Cosmos.
Yeah.
And it had a completely different ending, which I didn't like.
Okay.
That was one thing. But the other thing is the Cosmos edition, I have to say, was incredibly, it wasn't really edited. It was just like, and you know, all my typos, all my spelling mistakes, everything was just there.
Okay.
And you know, lots of other things as well. So it was a pretty shoddy piece of work, to be honest with you. And I'm proud of that book, and I wanted to have a more more presentable form of it. And Ian Waits at New Compress was interested in doing it, so we did that. And he did edit it, and we had it properly proofread as well. Kind of proofread it, but somebody else, not him, somebody else proofread it as well. So yeah. So it's not a commercially published book, and I don't know how many might have sold a very large number of copies or anything, but at least it's in at least it's out there in a kind of presentable form. And it's got a cover that was specially designed for it, which is nice as well. I mean, it's very much. I think
yes, it tells the parallel world tale. Yeah, it's got.
I think I actually suggested the idea for the cover, and the artist came up with it. Yeah, because it's some of the ideas that there's a Greek painting, isn't there, where a guy standing looking in the mirror, and you can only see the back of his head.
That's right. Well, the hardback in this edition, anyways, it's just 100. But there would have been a paperback edition as well, I'm sure.
What's paperback? I'm sure that's obviously that was sold more, but anyway, there it is. No, I'm happy for you to. I don't think you need to read the other one as well, but it does have a completely different ending, and I still find it. I mean, I think it's quite appropriate that a book that's about parallel worlds actually has two.
Has a parallel world, very meta of you.
Very meta. And it's funny that it happens to be that anyway. So that book was all about another of my bottles up repressed characters, who was an immigration officer. But he wasn't an immigration officer that managed, sort of policed the boundaries of the literal boundaries of a country. He policed the boundaries of our timeline, and so his idea was to stop people coming in, was to manage people coming in from other timelines. A lot of baddies coming in from other timelines. So that was part of the thing.
I do like a parallel universe tale. Bristol doesn't quite compare to an entirely different world, but the ones that spring to mind that I really like, they didn't do brilliantly well, I don't think, at the time, but the Charles Stross books. Oh, what the hell are they called? The Merchant Princes books, which involve parallel universes and being able to jump from one to t'other, that I really like. Anyway, so I'm partial to a parallel world tale, is what I'm saying.
Well, I quite like parallel world tales because I mean the world of the story, Marcher, apart from it deals with parallel worlds, it also is in a parallel world. It's set in the same time as us, but it's a different kind of Britain, and it's got different institutions and so on. And,
I always amuse myself by thinking, well, which of those mirror images is the true one? It's set from the perspective of one particular parallel version of Bristol, as you say, not like our Bristol, but parallel version of Bristol. But is that the index world, or is it just one of many copies or parallels? I
don't think in my idea there was an index world. There's just lots of them, because every time, every second, reality splits again.
Yes.
And which I think there's an idea that some physicists take seriously, isn't it? That it's constantly splitting and branching. So it's one way of resolving the whole Schrodinger's cat thing, isn't it?
That's right.
Listen to him, the cat is dead and alive, but in two different universes. But you'd have to split an awful lot of times to cover all those.
That's taking the sliding doors thing to its extreme.
So it's a sliding doors kind of thing. And my guy was simultaneously policing the boundaries of the world, because his moral feeling is that once you start accepting that, well, people traveling sideways between these worlds, once that starts happening, nobody has to take responsibility for their actions at all, because you can just dive off into another world.
Actually, switching gears again, sorry, just in the interest of time, I recently got myself a copy of Holy Machine. I would really love, which I think was your first novel, if I'm right in saying.
Yes.
There is a hardcover that came out in the US, I believe. Is it Wildside Press? That's rare as rocking horse shit. It's really hard to get a copy of that. I do look pretty much every day, but I haven't been able to find it. So I've satisfied myself with the Corvus copy for now. But that's another.
There's several different Corvus covers as well. The Holy Machine has had a lot of different covers, but that very first one with Wildside,
I like that.
Is a beautiful cover, I think, and it's very, very evocative. It's a picture made by German artists. It wasn't designed specially for the book, but it fits beautifully, and I love it. Have you got the paperback with that or not?
Yes, it's a paperback. Yeah.
No, but have you got? There is a paperback version with that Wildside.
Oh no, I don't. No, I see what you mean. No, this is the only edition that I've got. Yeah. I'll look out for it. So you mentioned the character in Marcher as an immigration officer, and it's obviously unrelated to your career, but I was reminded to ask you, at one point you were, I think for many years, a social worker, and then you went on to be an academic in that line and lecture and so on. But I'm curious to know, to what extent did your background as a social worker influence the stories that you chose to tell rather than your writing, particularly?
Marcher particularly, a lot of the action takes place in what they call social inclusion zones. I think they call them social inclusion. I can't actually remember it's ironic because they're actually there to socially exclude people.
Yeah.
But that kind of language is very common in the political politics and the welfare and so on. And it's run by an agency called the Department of Social Inclusion. And the Department of Social Inclusion was definitely a sort of satire of social services where I used to work in,
Right.
It was consciously meant to be a satire, and it dealt with that. It also dealt with the kind of people I used to work with, kind of people on the margins kind of thing. They were attracted by the idea of travelling between worlds because they didn't feel very welcome in this one,
No.
And so that was very, very much about my social work career, and it drew on a couple of short stories that I'd written. One of them was called The Welfare Man, which is very much about satirising social work as well, but satirising the welfare system, social welfare state system. So that novel was very definitely influenced by my social work career. The other novels not so obviously, but I identify at some level. I identify with underdogs in this world, and so I think that's why I went into social work. And I think a lot of my characters are kind of outsiders. They're people, not necessarily poor people, but they're people who don't feel quite at home in the world. I think most of them are.
So I got two more things I want to talk to you about, and I'll let you go with the rest of your evening. This is a bit of an addendum, if you like. I was trying to audit my growing collection of Eric Brown books as another author that I'd never heard of, and I'm actually yet to read anything by, but I've been hoovering his books up on the basis that I will at some point read them. And I was looking at To the Stars and Back, which is the a recent
anthology.
It's a tribute to him, and I noticed there's a Chris Beckett in there. So I was curious to know, is that were you commissioned to do a new story for this book, or is it one that's been?
It's a good story for that book. Eric Brown was a friend of mine, and
right, okay.
And he's a really lovely man, actually, Eric Brown. Really special man. And everyone who knew him was really, really fond of him. He was a very gentle person, and he was also incredibly. I didn't have a pretentious or arrogant bone in his body, really. He's just a really nice, humble person. And Ian Weiss, he was also a friend of Eric's, and he decided to put that collection together, which actually was partly a little fundraiser to provide a little gift to Eric's widow and his daughter.
Nice.
And yeah, so Eric only died beginning of last
quite
year.
recently, and he wasn't old particularly either, was he?
No, and there was sort of extra bond between me and him. He died actually after having lymphoma. And about a few weeks after I attended his funeral, I also went down with lymphoma. And so I was being treated for that last year. So I had a happier outcome than Eric, you know. So
well, right, good. Glad to hear.
But all the same, it makes me feel a special connection with him, really, you know, because we went through it in sequence.
But for the grace of God and all that, yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, there's a story by me in there, which is yeah, I came up with it especially. It's one of my very best stories, but I think I like it. Yeah.
Well, I shall get around to reading that at some point. It's got you're in good company. There's a really good lineup, if I can put it that way, in there. I shall enjoy reading that, I think.
Well, you know, Eric knew a lot of people in the science fiction world, you know, and I think I don't think there was anyone who wasn't really fond of him, you know. So and of course he was the science fiction reviewer for the Guardian as well for a long time, and
so yeah, right, I didn't know that.
Eric was really very, very, very well read.
Yeah. Well, I need to get my skates on then and start catching up, because he was pretty prolific. I think he's got a long writing career and many books, and I've only got probably 10 of them. So I should start reading them.
A really good old-fashioned writer that really sort of made a living. Yes, not a very prosperous living, but he made a living out of writing, and he wrote loads of books in all kinds of different genres, children's books, whodunits, you know, you name it, he did it, you know. And
a jobbing author, if I can put it that way. Yeah,
jobbing author. Yeah.
Right, my last question for you, Chris, if you don't mind, was so Tomorrow, which I've read recently and enjoyed, despite it not being what I would immediately thought of as my cup of tea, but I did enjoy it. But that was published 3 years ago, must be 2021, was it? So my obvious question to you is there a new book in the offing? Are you working on something?
Yeah, I mean,
what, if anything, can you tell us about it?
Well, I'm not necessarily very much about it because I don't want to jinx it, but I am working on a book now. It's been very slow. Now, as I said, I was ill last year, so that's one of my excuses.
Yeah, of course. But, so that would slow you down.
That did slow me down, but it is returning to a much more science fictional field, and it's about a generation ship.
Oh, very good.
Aldiss wrote a very good generation ship novel as well, didn't he? Non-stop. But,
yeah. Well, funny enough, it's right at the front of my mind at the moment, because just last Sunday, actually, I published a video looking at generation ship concept in science fiction, and there's loads of great books in there. Non-stop, as you say. What's the Heinlein one called?
The Heinlein one. I like the Heinlein one as well.
Orphans in the Sky, and then there's a Harry Harrison, Captive Universe, as those kind of older ones, and then there's Aurora by Kim Stanley Robinson. It's another good one. That almost kind of killed the generation ship genre in some respects. Sort of kind of proved the futility of the whole thing. But the there's a bunch of really good books. Ship of Fools is another one that's a more recent one that I really want to read. It's kind of generation ship meets a bit of sort of Lovecraftian cosmic horror, I think. But yeah, okay, well, good. So I shall look forward to that. I do like a good generation ship.
I haven't read many of those books, and I probably won't, because I kind of want to just make it my own generation.
Do your own thing. Yeah.
But I've read the Heinlein one and the oldest one. I don't remember reading out of that generation ship stories. I know, you know, there's all kinds of snags with generation ships, but I think what's fun about it is just there's something really interesting about the idea of someone being born and dying on a starship, you know.
Well, you're in a bottle universe, and
exactly, yeah, never seeing anything else than what that would do to you and what it'd be like, and I think, and I'm thinking, I'll give you one thing I'm thinking about is that actually in some ways it'd be quite nice, and you know, I don't know if that's been done before, but in some ways it'd be quite nice, you know. Everyone would have to get on with each other. You couldn't have any wars.
Okay. Well, I have to tell you, the general picture of at least of the 10 generation ship books that I looked at was that most of them aren't very nice, and
I know that's the normal thing.
Something can go wrong, it will go wrong, and there's hundreds of thousands of years in which it can happen. Yeah,
I'm aware of that, and I'm going to go do something different. But the only challenge for me is that if you set something in the world that's quite nice, it's more difficult to get an exciting story out of it, and that's why I'm struggling with it.
With a lacking classics, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. But we'll see where we go with that. But I think I'm getting a bit older. I think I am slowing down a bit. But I hope to get at least 1 or 2 more books out before I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Okay, well, I look forward to it. The Heinlein one is, I think, I don't know if it was the earliest, but it was one of the earliest, because although it came out in novel form as Orphans in the Sky, it was a fix-up of 2 shortish novellas, longish short stories. I'm never sure quite where the boundary between those things that were published in Astounding in the early 40s, like 1941 or something.
As I recall, they didn't even know they were on a starship, did they? They'd forgotten they were on a starship.
Right. Yeah, it became the whole universe. Yeah, and that's quite common. There's quite a lot of that goes on. Then the Harry Harrison one, an Aztec society is like Aztecs in space, and Aztec society has evolved in one kind of compartment of this of the starship. The reasons for that become obvious, but it is quite jarring. It's like, really, Aztecs they don't know they're on a starship. That was the point.
Yeah. But why did they particularly become Aztecs? Anyway, we won't go to that now.
There is a reason. Yeah, you can check it out once you finished your book. All right. Well, look, it's 9:15, so I should let you get on with your evening. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was really, really nice talking to you, and thank you very much for having me.
Likewise. Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate it.